Hey YouTube, Cam3XL. Yeah, this is my video response to ndcouy70. Dude, I went on that. I put that video up the other night, and I hadn't gotten a message about your first rant video, dude. So I popped back on this morning, saw that, and dropped you a message. But you brought up something about 9/11, and it's too long to write as a comment, so I figured I'd shoot a quick video response to you. Um, you're right about people from the Northeast kind of taking 9/11 personally, and it being heavy for us. I just wanted to share a quick story with you. Um, on that morning, I got woken up by a phone call from Jericho 106. At the time, he was living in an apartment building across the river from Manhattan, and just a couple of minutes from where we grew up. And I was down in Baltimore. And he called saying that his morning news got cut off abruptly, and he was just getting snow on the station. So, could I turn on cable or some sort of cable news and see whether there was anything going on? Because as he looked out his window, he saw smoke coming from one of the towers. And so I flipped on, and the first plane had just hit, and it was probably 2 days later before I actually turned my television off. That was sort of the beginning of it. My godmother was in Tower 7, which isn't one of the twins, but it's a brown office building next door. And we didn't hear from her until almost 9:30 that night. It took her that long to get back to her house in Plainfield, New Jersey, which shouldn't have been more than a 40-minute commute. There's a girder from the original as a memorial on the grounds of my high school, because we lost so many Montclair High School graduates and Montclair residents on that day. And while that's going on in New York, my mom was on her way to work in D.C. She works for the Fed as well. She works for the agency I work for now. She was working for then. And she was literally walking up 7th Avenue. 16th. On her way to work. And when she answered her cell phone, when I got a hold of her, and I asked her where she was because I couldn't catch her at home, she realized she was already downtown. I was like, by any means necessary, turn around, go back home now. You got to get out of there. And it just so happened that one of her next door neighbors had driven to work that day instead of taking the metro, and drove right by her, honked the horn and said hi. She pulled her over, let her know what was going on. They did a U-turn, and they got back out of the district, out into Silver Spring, Maryland, and got home. Another friend of mine who's an electrician was actually working the early morning crew on top of the CIA building. And, he actually saw an explosion from the Pentagon, from the rooftop, and just decided to wait it out sitting there on top of the building. Shortly after all this went on, cell phones started going down. And the only way we could communicate was Jericho and I were on Sprint at the time, which had the push-to-talk two-way. And that was still up while every other cell network was shut down without question. Push-to-two-way still worked. So he and I and anybody else who had that feature were able to communicate. Other than that, it was a whole lot of, waiting to see where everybody was and being worried because you just didn't know. Some of us didn't know all day, and after a while, some folks didn't know for days. And it was absolutely horrific. People were gone. People you cared about were close and in the middle of it and, out in the streets while this crap was going on. And that kind of opened my eyes and, maybe start thinking about communications, maybe start thinking about, what do you do when the shit hits the fan? What are contingency plans? Because when stuff goes down, everything you depend on fails. Even if it's just a day, we're not talking about the end of the world as we know it. That one-day event shut down everything we normally would depend on for days. You couldn't get the firemen to respond to your home. You couldn't get the police to come to where you were. Highways and tunnels were on lockdown, couldn't move around. All of D.C., all of New York was on shutdown, and half of the highways that went out into Pennsylvania from both places, because because of that plane that went down there, it was unreal. And it's a damn shame it took that for all of us to wave the flag and call ourselves one group of Americans for a second. But it's hard for me to understand how grown people who lived in the Northeast and went through that don't understand what we're doing when we prep. They had hands-on first, experience of what it's like when everything goes wrong, when it's real, real bad. When they're dealing with thousands of deaths. We sat there watching bodies drop out of windows because dropping 80 stories was better than dealing with the heat that they were standing in. The conspiracy theories about how and why don't even matter. When it's your cousin, it's your godmother, it's your brother. Another good friend of mine now that's just getting into this game and who should have known better for a long time. She works for Department of Health, and she does counseling on site for trauma sites. So she was a first responder to 9/11. She was a first responder to Katrina, and for the staff that goes through collecting, human remains and dealing, she does counseling for them. So she's dealt with, seeing people move body parts and, thousands being dead in a matter of moments. She's seen what what happens when the government mobilizes. How much they help, how much they don't help. How out of control National Guard gets. How citizens are just abused. How citizens take advantage. When what you're going to deal with when the best and the worst in people come out. You can't live through that and not take all this stuff seriously. And not do what we do. And they do. And they do every day. And, so we get into these petty arguments about what team you're on and, what hyphen comes after, before your label of American. And it's silly. Everybody who's ever had any power and the power's connected to money has always been able to maintain it by keeping dissension among those that are oppressed. A little bit of history, go back and, look up the Willie Lynch letters. And you'll see that it was documented. How in the world do you have, 10 times as many slaves as you do masters and keep them under control and not have them rebel? Well, there's a process, and part of that process is to keep dissension among them, to keep them divided. What used to happen during slavery is they'd pit light-skinned blacks against dark-skinned blacks. They were house staff and field folk. And, there was always, a little bit of class going on in every arena where they go, we get new immigrants that come in now and, they're the unwashed masses and they live in tenements. But as soon as they can get a little bit of education, they can come up, they buy into suburbs. And now they've risen above, those that are coming in behind them. And that little bit of separation, you're no longer a Mexican, you're a Mexican-American, and you're chasing the American dream, and screw the rest of your Mexican brothers. It starts in a singular group, and it just expands. Division, 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 always better than. Work hard so you can be better than somebody else. Instead of being the best you can be and being of use to people, it's work so you can be better than. What does that do for everybody you're trying to rise above? It just keeps crapping on them. They don't have, the powers that be don't have to crap on us anymore. They tease us with a couple of carrots and make us crap on each other. I don't know. I'm on a rant too, bud. But like I said, that box didn't allow enough characters for that response. Thanks so much for responding to my video the other day. Your friendship means a lot. And I hope this isn't the last rant we hear from you. All right? Cam 3XL out.